Well, thanks for joining us today, everyone. We're going to get started in a few minutes, but just a couple of housekeeping items. The presentation is going to be recorded, so feel free to keep your cameras off. Due to some privacy concerns, our presenters are not actually going to be answering any questions live. So any questions that you would have, please throw them in the chat, and then we will answer those at the end for you. And we'll get started in a few minutes here.
People are still hopping on. Just going to give it one more minute. Thank you all for joining us today. All right, we'll get started. Well, welcome everybody to the Winnebago Recovers virtual Lunch and Learn series, Substance Use and Opioid Response. My name is Hannah, Project Coordinator for Breakwater, Winnebago County's Youth Substance Use Prevention Coalition. The purpose of this series is to help our community have a better understanding of our resources available, but also how our community can work collaboratively and effectively to prevent substance use and ensure access to affordable and timely harm reduction and treatment services and support a strong and vibrant recovery community. We know substance use doesn't just affect the individual, it affects our entire community. When you love someone who struggles with substance use, it can be hard to find resources for yourself and your family. Today, I'm joined with Jamie Loehnis, leader of the Daybreak Project, and a family who will remain anonymous to keep their confidentiality and hopes their story will help other families. Welcome, Jamie and family. Jamie, can you please give a brief introduction about the Daybreak Project?
Sure, Hannah, thank you, and welcome everybody. Good to see so many people signed up for this. Daybreak is a support group for families and friends of people that struggle with substance abuse. And I'll tell the story about Daybreak shortly, but I want you to know what our preamble is. And we read this at the start of every single meeting. And it says, Daybreak Project is a gathering of people whose lives have been affected by someone's use and misuse of substances. We gather together to share our experiences, our struggles, and our successes as we navigate the many challenges we face as a result of another substance use. And that's what we're all about. And we started our very first Daybreak meeting was in March of 2018. But Daybreak, the concept of Daybreak started long before that. While I was still working, I received a phone call from a sister of an individual who was picked up with his fourth OWI. And she had asked if I would come over and spend time with her and her husband and talk through what that all meant. They were concerned for their brother. They were quite concerned about how to navigate the legal system. But more importantly, they were wanting to try to influence the brother into some kind of recovery. So I went over and I spent a couple hours with them at their kitchen table, and I helped them navigate some of the legal stuff that they were concerned about. But more importantly, we talked about the dynamic of the family and what the family was doing, especially those two, in helping their brother stay ill with alcoholism. And through some things that happened wonderfully and using the legal consequences as some leverage, we were able to get the brother to agree to go to treatment. He went to treatment and he's sober today. And so about 2 or 3 months after that, the sister and her husband asked me to meet with them again because they knew of many, many families in the Valley who had loved ones who are struggling with substance use disorders. And they thought it would be helpful if we could do something to help those folks similarly in the way that our time together was helpful for them and then also for their brother. And that really was the seeds of Daybreak. And we met with, as we put this together, we met with probation officers, doctors, counselors, some affected family members, other folks that were in the professional circles, and just asked what would be helpful. And the bottom line was what would be helpful is a place for people to turn to learn how to talk about this, learn how to break the no talk rule, and then start having difficult conversations about their family situation, and bust through the stigma piece that addiction is so prevalent in. So that was the start of Daybreak. And we are very fortunate to have a mom and dad with us today to talk about their journey with Daybreak, and then also with their loved one, and their loved one is still in process. And we had a conversation on Thursday as we were prepping for today, and because of some of the consequences that their loved one is facing, we agreed to have them be blacked out so that you couldn't necessarily see who these two folks are, these two wonderful folks. But our conversation talked about, but doesn't anonymity sometimes feed the stigma piece and the secrets and the no talk rule? And while we acknowledge that, we also, this is a very critical time right now on their loved one's journey, and we didn't want to do anything that was going to interfere with that or complicate that. So we're just really, really lucky to have these folks with us today. And then the other thing I think it's important to spell out, Daybreak Project's initial and primary purpose is not to get anybody sober. The purpose of Daybreak is to provide a safe place for people to come together and talk about their struggles with their loved one. More importantly, how to begin talking to each other and with other family members about the difficulties that addiction does with families, and just learning how to talk about that and then share with each other what's working for them and what's not working for them. And we get into enabling, we get into boundaries, we get into consequences, we get into a whole bunch of stuff. But it's important to understand that the primary goal is to provide that safe space. And if a loved one finds recovery, that's just a wonderful outcome, but that's not the goal of Daybreak. And with that, I think I'd like to introduce Mom and Dad. And I would start with just asking you to share with the group how it is that you came to, that you got involved with Daybreak.
Well, I'll start, Jamie. Thanks for introductions, and thank you for the opportunity to talk a little bit about our story and some of the challenges and the support that we've gotten. And Mom will jump in here appropriately. She always is good at filling in the blanks that I leave. But yeah, so one of our daughters, we're a blended family. My wife, Mom here is, we've been married now just a couple years. And so we've got an interesting, wonderful blended group of kids. I would say all young adults. So one of our daughters has been going through some anxiety and depression, and so she was seeing a therapist for some support. And in that discussion, it became real evident that our daughter was, a lot of the anxiety had to deal with her brother, who is the topic of the discussion here today. And during that discussion, it just so happened that Daybreak was brought up, and I believe there was a pamphlet there at the counseling center, and so she brought that home She brought home the idea of Daybreak and an organization that brought families of substance abuse people together and to talk and share. And so that's how we kind of got started really with Daybreak. It was through a connection through a counseling center from our daughter, which I thought was really, frankly, a godsend. I mean, it's that moment really made a big difference for Jean and I. So, so Mom, why don't you take it from there as far as
Sure.
where we went?
Sure. One thing probably just to preempt what Dad just said is that, you know, prior to our daughter seeking community counseling and bringing that brochure home about Daybreak, there wasn't a lot of conversation that we were having as a family about our son's use. And there wasn't a lot of conversation among the siblings. There was conversation probably between Dad and I, but not anywhere near the conversation that we've been able to have now since we found Daybreak. So I think coming to Daybreak has been, as Dad said, a godsend, but I think it was also our family's way of finding a turning point to be able to deal with the effects of our son's use on us as a family. Because we hadn't been talking about it. We had really no idea what we should be doing. We had no idea how all of our other kids were being affected. And Daybreak was just like this very safe place that we came, where we were able to start our journey as a family and being able to deal and cope with all of this.
So as Jamie pointed out, the term no talk rule, a number of you might be familiar with that, but that's exactly what Jean is mentioning, Mom is mentioning. So it's, you know, it really, from my upbringing, and I think it centers around that, is that as I was growing up as a young man, and certainly as I was raising my kids, it was really kind of putting things under the rug, right? As issues came up, we dealt with them and we moved on, versus really understanding the roots of what's going on and why a particular son or daughter is struggling. So I think, you know, this certainly opened up a whole new world for me. And it might just seem quite simple to most people, but it really was a revelation that, you know, let's talk through these issues, get to understand them, and so they, you know, that's core to certainly what Daybreak provided.
And I think too, you know, a lot of families exist in this belief system, especially in our culture, that if you raise your children the right way, and if you are the right kind of people and you have great values, you're going to raise kids that are going to be successful and well-adjusted and won't have any kind of substance abuse problems. And, you know, when you're raised in a belief system that says that, it's very easy for you to take on the burden of, oh my goodness, what have I done wrong that I've got a kid who is using substances? And so it's really hard to even begin that conversation sometimes within the family when there's so much guilt around, you know, what your son or daughter is doing. It's like, this doesn't happen in our family, you know. And when we came to Daybreak, we were able to just sit down at a table with people, and with Jamie, you know, who has a lot of professional background in this topic, has excellent boundaries, excellent professional experience. And we were able to sit down and really just talk about some of the things we had never talked about before as a family.
This might be a good time for me to interject one of the themes that we talk about, especially with new members that join Daybreak, and that's the concept of the 3 C's. And and Mom just alluded to that a little bit when she talked about the guilt. And if you raise kids a certain way, then they're not going to be prone to substance use disorders. And we all know that that's just not true. Addiction is no respecter of zip code, gender, household income, position in life, station in life, or what have you. And we all know that. I recognize many of the names on this presentation, and you all know this. The 3 C's are, first of all, the first one is nobody causes anybody to become an addict. And that's important. And that truly gets at the guilt and the embarrassment, especially moms and dads, that they feel they failed their kids. And what that does is keeps people from talking about it. And we joke once in a while at Daybreak when we talk about people going to dinner parties and standing around talking, and some families are talking about how successful their kids are. They just graduated from college. They've got this new exciting career and they're professional and this, that, and the other. And sometimes our parents are standing around thinking, oh my God, what am I going to say? My kid just got picked up for his 4th OWI. He's been fired 6 times. He's not able to hold a job. He doesn't clean his room. Those kinds of things don't get talked about at dinner parties. And so back to the causing piece, parents don't cause their kids to become addicts. The second C is control. Every single family in our Daybreak group has attempted numerous efforts at controlling their individual loved ones using, and it fails every single time for the most part. Attempting to control that is like chasing mercury on a desktop table. Of course, I'm old, so they probably don't do that in school anymore. But and then the third one is cure. Nobody can cure somebody else's addiction. We treat addiction as any chronic illness. It's relapsing and it's remitting. Relapse is using, remitting is recovery. And just like nobody causes anybody to get cancer or diabetes or multiple sclerosis, there are periods of relapse and periods of remittance in those chronic illnesses, just like addiction. So Jean, did you want, or Mom, did you want to add to that?
Yes, certainly. I think what Jamie just brought up is something that we also discovered as a family as we continued to meet with the Daybreak group, once every month. We learned a lot about something that probably, I'm going to say, Dad had been doing most of the time, because Dad was the one who had been raising, my stepson for most of his years as a kid. But it's called enabling. I know all of you who are here understand what enabling is. Most of you are, in the professional field. But, I think Dad was doing everything that he felt he was doing out of love and care to, try to help and support and stop a lot of our son's use without even knowing that's what he was doing. And, once we came to Daybreak, I think it was just really helpful for our whole family to understand that concept of enabling. We were able to, number one, break the no talk rule and started talking about it. But then we also needed to talk about what all of us were doing to enable this problem. And there's just freedom, what I've experienced. And I think, Dad, you're going to have to chime in for what it is for you. But I know for all of our experiences, there's been a lot of freedom that we've been able to experience, just understanding how our family was enabling our son's behaviors. And it's like we were able to break the status quo. The status quo had been held for so long, and we were able to break the status quo. Now I'm looking, it looks like Dad is muted right now, and I think he wants to chime in. So I'm not sure, Danielle, are you able to, there he goes.
Oh, great. I didn't realize when I muted that I couldn't get back in on my own. So, no, I'm sure that everyone here that's on this session has worked with a lot of different people in different backgrounds. A lot of the context from which our son is dealing with was a divorce, and with that divorce, a separation from his mother, which was his adopted mother. So our son is an adopted son, and so he severed that relationship, and it's severed ever since. And with that, then yes, Jean's right. I was the one that stepped in and trying to do my best. And I think one of the probably most difficult moments that I can remember in my life is when our son came to me and said, "Dad, I feel like I want to kill myself." And so those kind of moments cause you to really dig deep and try to understand what's going on here. And certainly that next step was to get him help with, both his medical doctor and get him some counseling. But I think that moment, and why I'm bringing that up and under the context of enabling, it causes you to just want to say, okay, I'm going to do whatever I need to do to make sure that my son is going to be okay. And what you do though then is you start to, for example, pay for his attorney when he's been put up for drunk driving, or you help support him with an apartment payment when he's not working, and you just continue to do those kinds of things because your fear is that he is going to act on what he had indicated when he was in high school. And this is now 10 years later, but that's the fear that it causes you to really enable and to do the wrong thing, which is to allow him to continue to struggle versus supporting but not enabling. And there's a fine line there.
Yeah, we spend a fair amount of time on that fine line, and our guiding definition of enabling is when parents especially, but also siblings and friends, when they interrupt natural consequences for somebody's using. That's the definition we use for enabling. And then we discuss, because each month families are given an update of what's going on, and our families are all in different parts in their journey with their loved ones. And so we talk about what kind of steps or decisions could be made that would stop enabling the continued behavior, and or how to interrupt the status quo, because that's an important piece in all of this. And then the other piece that we spend a fair amount of time on is looking for leverage points. Leverage points are those things that can help influence some choices that the loved one might make towards their use. So we spend a fair amount of time in our monthly meetings talking about that stuff. And these are group discussions. It's very common for one set of families to say, well, we tried this and this didn't work, or we tried this and it did work. So there's a lot of give and take in our monthly discussions.
Yeah. Now, the first meeting that Mom and I went to, we came to a group meeting, and two of our daughters came. The daughter that had been going through some counseling, and then another daughter that is part of the blended family. So, and that was a really a great breakthrough, and it just so happened there wasn't a big group there, so we got some individual attention from Jamie and a couple of the other founders of the group. So I think that really made a difference for these two girls to have a chance to have the no talk rule become no more.
Mhm.
In other words, we were able to talk about it and get it out on the table, and especially for the daughter that was seeking counseling. So from that point on, for mom and I, we found ourselves looking forward to the monthly meetings with Daybreak, created relationships with the other families, and it just became this open environment of helping each other as the challenges went on from month to month, and there's constantly something that somebody's dealing with that the group could help with. And we were so blessed to have Jamie as a facilitator for that group, and just keeping the conversation going. And it's great because there's both mom and dads there, and it's both men and women. And so
Yep. And I think it's awesome too, because the power that I have felt in it is that when we come together with different families, it could be different moms or dads, it could be grandparents who are raising their grandchildren because an adult son or daughter is using and isn't able to parent right now. It could be friends of someone. There's so much power in being able to know that you're not alone. And I think for me, that's what was really helpful. I think for our daughters who came to the meetings in the beginning, that's what was really helpful for them was, oh my gosh, this doesn't have to be such a stigmatized issue. There are many families who deal with this. And it was just very powerful and very wonderful to know that you weren't alone. It was so supportive. And, we've moved from Wisconsin since then. But what's so wonderful is that, we are still able to keep in touch. And, while technology is not, ideal and is not 100% great when it comes to, being able to be in person together, it certainly can be a godsend for you no matter where you are to continue getting that support. So, there's just power in families being able to meet together and to talk about their specific experiences together. Yeah.
We originally were meeting in person at the Levin Community Room. Levin was gracious enough to let us use their space and very supportive of what Daybreak was doing. But when the pandemic started, we went to Zoom, and we were very nervous about that. We thought that we were going to lose members. We thought that the interest would go by the wayside because it was video versus in person. And we found the complete opposite. Our group is strong. People are at our meetings. And I think while the circumstances are always different, the dynamic of loving somebody who is in active addiction or is trying to get a foothold or a toehold in recovery, the dynamic is very much the same. And I think Daybreak has become a lifeline for individuals who had nobody to talk to about this stuff. And then the video actually helps. When people are in group discussions and you start seeing heads nodding in affirmation or an agreement or an acknowledgement of what somebody's talking about, when we were spread out over the tables at 11, you couldn't see everybody's head bobbing, but with everybody's head on the screen, you get the feel that people are hearing and understanding what somebody is going through in the moment. So we've been able to maintain our connection using the Zoom platform. And actually, in a couple of cases, it's made it easier because we have one set of parents whose daughter is struggling, and she has a little girl, a little baby girl, and they're able to continue to attend via the Zoom platform. So that's working out good. And so mom and dad just shared that they've moved out of the area. They're still able to connect with us. We have another family that transferred from Kimberly-Clark down to Georgia, and they're able to connect with us. And our co-founders are down in Florida, and they connect with us. So the Zoom thing has worked, and I think it's worked because it's true, birds of the feather do like to flock together, and there's a comfort in the Daybreak group.
Mhm. Yes, most definitely.
The other concept, go ahead. I'm sorry, Mom.
I was just gonna say, I don't know what our time is, but I'm wondering, I want to be sure that we've got time to be able to answer any questions if people, have questions. But Jamie, go ahead and say what you were gonna say.
Well, I was going to talk about two things. One, oftentimes in families that are struggling with addiction, there needs to be difficult conversations. So we do spend a fair amount of time scripting those difficult conversations. And there's an adage that says practice makes perfect. In Daybreak, we say that's bullshit. Practice makes habit. And it's important to practice difficult conversations, and that you have difficult conversations in twos, in pairs, and practicing those difficult conversations, because when deflection starts, when argument starts, when loved ones that are addicted push back and get defensive, it's easy to get off track with the difficult conversation. And sometimes the difficult conversations are about boundaries, they're about expectations, and more importantly, they're about consequences. And we spend a fair amount of time talking about the difference between consequences and punishment. Consequence is a pre-discussed outcome. If somebody's behavior continues in this, that, or the other way, this is what the consequence is going to be. And the leverage point could be where they're living. It could be financial support. It could be other family systems, things that a family has agreed that they're not going to allow that person to participate in. Those are difficult conversations. But having that conversation on the front end, discussing very, very clearly and specifically what the consequences would be if somebody is not able to change their behavior, that's a lot different than it being perceived as punishment. Punishment usually is more like it comes with the rug being pulled out from under somebody's feet. We just don't believe in that way of doing things. We believe in having those conversations on the front end. And then the other piece with the conversation is empowering the individual and give them some choice as to when would be a good time to have that conversation, versus we're going to sit down at 6 o'clock and we're going to have this conversation. No, the conversation could go, we need to have a conversation with you. And we would like to know when would be a good time for you to have that conversation. So it's an intervention approach that is more invitation versus confrontational. And that we spend some time on that, because sometimes having those hard conversations, especially if you're on the heels of breaking a no talk rule, there's a skill involved in being able to have a pointed, compassionate, loving, caring conversation with somebody without getting sidetracked by the defensiveness and those kinds of things. So, Mom,
I'm so glad you brought that up, Jamie, because Daybreak was able to help us in being able to have our first conversation with our son, not just with ourselves, but then to help us kind of outline what were the talking points that we wanted to bring up when we talked with him, breaking our no talk rule with him. What was our goal? What did we want to accomplish? And then we were able to practice as we brought the family together, because our children also participated in a conversation that we had with our son, the first conversation. And we were able to practice together as a family before we actually brought our son in. And I think there was a certain confidence, a certain safety net that everybody in the family felt before we entered into that conversation with our son for the first time. So for me, that was wonderful.
Yeah, I think that having that resource and support around conversations is so important. I mean, because using care and concern, those two words are so important versus you should do this or this is wrong. It's more coming from a perspective of, love and wanting the best and how can we help you is certainly a lot better approach. And we haven't had a lot of success on that, frankly, but we know that we're planting seeds, and we know that that if we are there when he needs us, and he knows that we can be there for him, that whenever that point is, that'll happen. And certainly there's a lot of prayer, a lot of faith that goes into a lot of this, but I couldn't agree with more, Jamie and Mom here with regard to the practicing and getting the words right, because the words, words can make a big difference in how they come across. And I think anytime you're starting to talk more about the issues and the care and concern, it's going to need to be, it needs to come across that way. It needs to come across as really from a perspective of love, really. Mm-hmm. So we've been on a journey, and our son is continuing to try to work through all that. And even more recently we had counsel as to what words to use and how to approach a situation. And so we've got more to do, and we just need to continue to find that path to helping him break loose and become the person that he wants to be.
Yeah, and it can be frustrating. It can be frustrating as parents to continue to try and to continue to watch things happening that are not helpful, that he's not helping himself. It can be very frustrating, but I think continuing to not give up and continuing to keep appropriate boundaries with him, but yet let him know that we love him, we care about him, we are not going to give up or leave, will be a lifeline for him when he's either ready or when our support is needed.
Yeah. And I want to add an important piece that we talk about a lot, and that is the importance of staying connected. And the caveat is, how do you stay connected without enabling, and figuring out a way to do that? Because families are the first line. So this series, it's a 6-part series that Hannah and Breakwater folks have put together. I think it's excellent that the kickoff was friends and family, because they are the front line, right? And so helping families stay connected so that when the person is ready, and typically it's going to be born out of some negative consequence, when that individual is ready, it is comforting to know for that person that they can reach out. And as difficult as it can be and has been, staying connected with your loved one in the best way that you possibly can, with an eye on not enabling. And then the other piece I want to say is, and Dad said that haven't had many successes. From my perch, this family has had tremendous amount of success. If the only success is measured by their loved one getting clean and sober, then I think it's missing some marks. And Mom, you said this about 20 minutes ago, that breaking the no talk rule has this family now talking about all kinds of things that are important to the family, not just the loved one's addiction. And to me, that's a huge success. I know that this loved one, you've had contact with this loved one in some of his difficult times in the last couple of weeks. And he knows that you guys love him and that you're going to be there for him. And you have offered ways that you can be there for him. And he's responded. The fact that he's responded to me is a huge success. Dad, I know that the ultimate goal would be for a loved one to get clean and healthy and well and all those things. And yes, that's a wonderful thing. But there are tons of successes along the way. And you guys and your family have had tremendous success in your development to get to where you're at today. And I also say that setbacks, while they might be heartbreaking, setbacks can become steps closer. It really depends on how those are managed and talked about upfront and transparently. So setbacks oftentimes are not going backwards. It's a goofy way of going forward, and it's just information. And so we spent some time talking about that in Daybreak. And there was one other thing I wanted to say about all of that, and I think I lost it, but if it comes up, I'll pipe in. Okay.
Well, and I think Jamie just showed all of us, one of the very important things that Daybreak has done for us and continues to do for us is, as he shared, there have been some setbacks in the last couple of weeks, and his words that you just heard were an awesome example of the support that we continue, to get in times that are frustrating for our family. So thank you, Jamie, and amen.
Thanks.
Yes.
On behalf of myself and Breakwater, and I know this entire room, thank you to all three of you, Jamie and family, for being with us today and sharing your story and experience with navigating resources and support for family and friends. Before we move into questions from anybody in the room, I have a question for you. If you had a magic wand, how could we improve resources for family and friends in Winnebago County?
Okay, so Dad is pointing his finger at me. So I'll be our spokesperson for this one. We were so fortunate that we came across Daybreak, and we came across Daybreak just because one very wonderful counseling center and one very wonderful community counselor put a pamphlet about Daybreak in our daughter's hand, and she brought it home. And without that, we would not be where we are today, and our son would not be experiencing the support that he's experiencing, and that I have hope for his future that he'll be able to continue to receive. But if she hadn't brought that pamphlet home, I don't know that we would have found Daybreak. And, there just is such a void I see in resources that are readily available to families who are in the midst of crisis, in the midst of what they don't even know is a crisis. And I think if there were able to be some type of a hotline or some type of something that everyone was able to know about, that said, if you have someone you love or you care about, someone in your family or outside of your family who is using substances and you don't know what to do next, you maybe don't know how to talk to each other about it, you don't know how to talk to that person about it, here is a hotline that you can call. And there will be people there that can listen to you and can steer you in a direction where you can find some help to be able to deal with that. I think that would be wonderful. I think there'd be so many more people like us who would be able to find resources like Daybreak and probably many others, just specifically for families. I don't know, Dad, is there anything else?
No, I think that's exactly right. And I think ultimately, with the hotline approach, if then there were opportunities to have more small groups like we have at Daybreak, Daybreak-like organizations, whether within the county or
Yeah.
Separate groups that were founded. I think anybody that's got great background in counseling and support with small groups like that, it would be a wonderful thing to be able to bring people together of like situations and share stories and challenges. I think that would be awesome if we could just have more of that.
Yep. It's almost as if you're putting the oxygen mask on the family members who are really, as Jamie said before, the ones who, along with all of our great community people, but our family members are the ones who are on the front lines lots of times with substance abuse users. And having that support for family members certainly allows us to be able to help and assist our people who are struggling.
Yeah. Very true.
Thank you both for sharing. We do have a question from the audience, and I'm going to direct this question to Jamie. How does this compare to Al-Anon? And what are the advantages of a program like Daybreak?
Thanks. Great question. We, as a group, as an organization, we support Al-Anon. The difference between Al-Anon and Daybreak is Al-Anon follows pretty much the 12-step program. And the dynamic of Al-Anon is different than the dynamic with Daybreak in that it's discussion. It's quasi-group. It's individuals sharing what's going on with them and then opening it up to feedback from other individuals. We don't have traditions. We don't have steps. We just don't follow that path. And some individuals have gone to Al-Anon before they came to us and found that some of their needs weren't being met. And I think the give and take and the flow of conversation lends itself to folks that weren't able to find what they were looking for by going to Al-Anon. So I think that's the biggest difference.
Thank you. Lastly, before we end here, we have no more questions in the chat. We have Daybreak's contact information, email and phone number up on the screen for you. If you do have any questions that pop into your mind that we can relay back to Daybreak, you can email them at info@breakwater.org. And we look forward to seeing you next week. March 8th, again, using the same Zoom link at 12 p.m., where we will be discussing Breakwater, which is our prevention coalition. Thank you again for joining us for our first Lunch and Learn today. Everybody have a beautiful rest of your day.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Hannah.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Hannah.